It's Florida Daily TV, brought to you by FloridaDaily.com. For all your news on politics, business, and education, it's FloridaDaily.com. Now, here's your host, Ed Dean.
Welcome to an edition of Florida Daily TV. I'm your host, publisher of FloridaDaily.com, Ed Dean. Let's get to it. We do this every day. Kevin Derby also hanging out with us. He is our news editor. And Matt Schellenberg also hanging out with us, former city council person out of Jacksonville, and also a news contributor on some of the iHeart radio stations that we have a contract with. So we're going to be doing this every day at FloridaDaily.com. So let's start off with it. A lot of big news. Donna Shalala, South Florida Congresswoman, who was the HHS secretary in the Bill Clinton administration, Kevin, I want to start with you, is she's not saying we need to shut down. She says we need to shut down again. The pandemic is very strong, especially in those three counties. One of them she represents down in Miami-Dade. She's talking about it. I don't hear a lot of other Democrats coming out, or do you think that flock's about ready to come out now in the next several days? Nikki Fried, the agriculture commissioner, has been bragging that she would have shut it down much sooner. Where's this story going to go next?
Yeah, I absolutely think you're going to see more Democrats across the Sunshine State push to close things down again. And look, Shalala has cover, gives them cover. She is the longest tenured HHS secretary in American history. She's someone who can speak with authority on those issues. And yeah, I think she gives absolutely a lot of cover for the Democrats. You will hear more about this in the days to come, to be sure.
You know, Matt, you as a business guy, but you also as a news contributor with us. When we did the first shutdown, we used to joke around all the time, especially on my radio show, but we used to joke around all the time going, these shutdowns don't really have a lot of teeth. I mean, you could still go to the store, you could still go to Walmart, Public, you know, even some minor areas of the beach, at the parks were kind of being restricted, but it wasn't a major shutdown as we looked before. Kevin and I have a background in journalism, so do you, and I always sit back and say, to me, the follow-up question is sometimes the best. So when you hear individuals like the agriculture commissioner, Nikki Fried, saying we open up too early, or you have Donna Shalala saying we need to shut down again, well, my question is, how would you make this shutdown much different than the last one? And you keep saying we reopened early. Tell me, how long should we have been closed? What kind of shutdown would you like to implement here?
So one of the things that they don't do, you like to follow up question, how would you have handled it differently? And right now they don't have an answer. And when they originally shut it down, it was for 2 weeks, and then it went to a month, and then it went for 2 months. What happens is that I think the elected officials, they lose credibility, and this is exactly where they are right now. And the citizens are taking it upon themselves, not only go back to school, they're saying, I want to go brick and mortar, or they're going to stay at home. Whatever it is, the parents or grandparents, guardians are going to take control of this, and they're going to determine what the children are going to do and what's best for their family.
Now we're going to get into that in a few moments with the schools. Let's talk about some of the polling numbers on the shutdowns. We know that the AP and Fox News and a bunch of groups had done polls back in April, Kevin, where it was like 83% supported lockdown, stay-at-home orders. The AP came out recently about 2 weeks ago, and that number was barely hovering around 50%. Do you think those numbers stay flat? Because you do have a lot of economic consequences. I don't think politically you're going to see another shutdown before the election.
I don't think you're going to see it politically. Look, I think the problem is when you bring in national polls for this kind of topic, yeah, there are a lot of places, New York, for example, New Jersey, Connecticut, which are nowhere near in as bad shape now as they were a few months ago. Why? Well, maybe it's the tight measures they took. Maybe it's the mandatory mask requirements. You are starting to see more and more damage here in the Sun Belt, though, including Florida. The numbers are up here in Florida. We just saw Greg Abbott, a very conservative Republican down in Texas, announce a mandatory mask order. You're starting to see it. And because of it, I do think there will be a lot of pressure here in Florida to tighten up the requirements. I will say right now, Ron DeSantis has a big problem on his hand. His polling numbers are going south. Now, granted, I think a lot of those were, to be honest, I think he was defying gravity with the Democrats. His numbers were too strong with Democrats because of his proposal for giving teachers more money. You know, I think he's kind of coming back down to earth. He's not in bad shape, but his numbers were they're coming back.
He's not going to do a statewide mandatory face mask, is he?
I don't think he's going to be able to. But look, part of this comes down to the presidential election. Would this be a very, Matt Kemp is doing the same thing in right now in Georgia. And the question becomes, well, who gets that Trump lane in 2024? Both Kemp and DeSantis are trying to fight it out for it. It is a bad time right now to be a governor. Whatever you do is going to anger a lot of people.
You know what? This is one of those funny things. The Democrats are supposed to represent the low income, but 80% of the people that were laid off and continue to be laid off make less than $40,000. They are impacting the various people that are supposed to represent. And if they don't go back to work, how are they going to make money after July 31st when the actual potential addition of money for unemployment cuts off.
But let me get to this face mask issue. Where in the world did you see this become such one of the biggest political issues out there? We did a story last week at FloridaDaily.com. Healthinsurance.com, which is a big outfit, does a lot of online numbers about people's buying and how they're looking at certain things with their family, let's say their incomes and how they buy certain products. They came out and said that it was well over 70% of those out there believe that cities should force it. And in fact, almost about 44% was out there going, you also need to fine these individuals. How does this become? Is this really going to be a make or break issue in the upcoming election?
I think what happened, this goes back to government. They have lost all credibility. But if you go into Walmart or Costco or Public, they basically say wear a mask. And I think this is the dynamic of what you're going to see. If you want business people or people, your clients coming into your building, you're going to require that because I think that corporations are going to take control of this and make it happen.
Kevin, what I find interesting about this is that the Democrats have, and a lot of Republicans are, like Mayor Lenny Curry out of Jacksonville, and a lot of other Florida cities are enforcing face mask wearing. Now, many of them will tell you it's not really enforceable. We'll get into that in a couple of minutes here with the sheriffs. But having said this, has it been unfair to Governor DeSantis? I think a lot of people would agree, maybe sometimes the messaging out there, but has it been fair or unfair to the governor? You have a lot of these in many cities, Democrat mayors. Oh, he should have done this. He should have done that. And I'm just asking the question, did you really need Dad's permission to turn off the lights at a local beach? No. Did you really need Dad's permission to set a curfew during COVID lockdown? No. I mean, why do you think the governor's getting a lot of unfairness out there? Because he didn't need to do a statewide shutdown. The local cities could have done it on their own.
I think he did need to push a statewide shutdown. Look, it comes to being an executive in a time of crisis. You're going to draw fire. To quote Harry Truman, if you can't stand the heat, get out of the kitchen. And that's what it comes down to. DeSantis is going to draw a lot of fire here. And look, the president is pretty much the chief responsibility for it. That's what it comes down to. Because we're in such a tight political year, a tight presidential election, this has become a partisan issue. Now, there are some Republicans at the state levels, Greg Abbott, Larry Hogan, I can name others, who basically said, look, the federal government has failed. And there is something to that. This has been a failure of leadership across the board, leaving it to companies to kind of pick up the slack, leaving it to cities to pick up the slack.
Well, but hold on. But hold on. But my point that I'm saying this is, when you have cities that can do their own curfew during a hurricane, they can do, if they need to shut down something for whatever, they don't need the governor's permission. That's what I'm asking here. So when they sit back and go, well, the governor should have done this, if the mayor can do it on his own, why, again, we're just blaming the responsibility somewhere else.
Well, I look at it slightly differently. I think that it does take the governor and the president and the mayor to make these actions. But what they did is they only shut it down. They didn't. This goes back to your original premise. They didn't shut it down for 2 weeks. If you had shut everything down for 2 weeks or 3 weeks, we wouldn't be having the problem. It would have been.
But how do you enforce it?
Huh?
How do you enforce it?
Because. Well, just like you do anything else, you basically do like a hurricane. You cannot go anywhere for 2 weeks. Period. You have 2 days. Get all your food. Go whatever it is. And in 2 weeks, you cannot do anything.
Okay. On this issue, let me start with you before I go to Kevin. A lot of the issues we want to get to. Do you see any more shutdown statewide before the election, or maybe more locally?
No more shutdowns because you're impacting the various people that you're supposed to represent, which are the poor.
Talk to me about Florida, Kevin. Are we going to see any more shutdowns happening, or just going to be more on a local level, primarily maybe in South Florida?
I think you will see shutdowns at the local county levels. I don't think you're going to see a statewide one.
All right. Again, as we continue on with Florida Daily TV, I'm your host, publisher, Ed Dean, along with Kevin Derby, the editor, Matt Schellenberg, news contributor out there. Here's another story. Schools reopening. You cover a lot on schools here for us as well. So does Kevin. Let me start with you. This has been all over the map. I've seen, and I want to get to the unions because the unions are not in agreement altogether. We talked about reopening of the schools. They did this district-wide survey through all 67 counties out there, and they figured that a lot of parents sit back and go, we want schools to start back up. You can couple together, which these surveys say we like online schooling, plus if we can gather the two as well, maybe a few partial days and more on online schooling, parents like this idea. Then we find out, well, maybe because certain spikes in COVID numbers are going to go up right now, or are going up. But the question is, does it really have a pandemic like the flu season has with young people? So What's going to happen? We had one school superintendent out of Jacksonville, Dr. Diana Green, almost blamed the RNC for holding off on some things convention. So I say, why not let each school district, if the disease and the if it's being elevated, unfortunately, it's inflaming more down in South Florida. Let that school district down there decide. We may do it after Labor Day, and let other school decisions decide on a local level. Good or bad?
I think every school district should have it, but you need better leaders than we have right now, both on the administrative side and on the school board side. How can you, as a parent, have a child in the lower grades go 5 days a week, and then in the middle grades go 2 days a week, and then in high school go maybe 2 days? And who is responsible when they come home or are they home? This is a tremendous, as the Wall Street Journal said recently, who does it impact? It impacts really the spouses, the misses, in any relationship. Does she go back to work? Because the child is going to be home 2 or 3 days a week, even though maybe on the lower side they're 5 days a week. The unintended consequences of not opening at schools every day, it impacts the parents. Right. And I think the parents should have the obligation to school stay open. They can do it however they want, as long as they're consistent going forward.
Kevin, let me talk about the messaging. You got the Department of Education Secretary, Richard Corcoran. You've got the governor. Has the messaging been a little bit off? They say, we want you to get back in the brick and mortar. Why not say, we want the schools to start back up and also include online education out there by a certain date? Has the messaging been off or not?
The messaging has been absolutely off at the federal and state levels. Look, online education has been a fundamental part of school choice for the past 20 years. We now have the administration, namely on Twitter from the president, saying online school is bad. We have the governor and Richard Corcoran now saying, well, we believe in local control, but every school district now has, all 67 counties in this state have to have schools open, brick and mortar, 5 days a week.
Why the rush?
I think that is a rush because frankly, it's all about Ron DeSantis protecting the president of the United States in what's going to be a very challenging election season. That's what it comes down to. Politics is controlling everything here. And let's be very clear. Look, I think suburban women in particular are going to turn away. If you play your cards wrong on this, they will absolutely turn away from you. Nothing is more important as an issue than child safety for a lot of suburban women voters.
Okay, well, help me out. You're saying that don't open them up, but open them up, but the parents have a choice going forward.
I think you absolutely need to give them a choice. I think,
right,
frankly,
I agree. Yes.
having mandates come from upstairs, whether it's Tallahassee or Maryland Avenue, the Department of Education in D.C., only complicates matters. Look, I'm old enough to remember when conservatives used to think education was not supposed to be a federal issue. Now, apparently, it is. That's part of the problem.
It's interesting. You look at a lot of the poll numbers out there. The majority of parents do not, and I understand. I'm not a parent. I understand a lot of parents out there that sit back and say, you know what, with the numbers going up, we are a little cautious of what we see on TV and what's being reported, that we might want to wait till certain things might change a little bit. That's not a fake poll. The numbers are showing 60%. What the numbers are also not being heavily reported by the media, we reported at FloridaDaily.com, is you've got Broward County parents and teachers. I want to get into the teachers part in a moment. You've got St. Johns County. You've got a lot of districts that's got that survey out there, Matt, saying we want to support more online. And in fact, the plurality is we don't even have a problem with online versus maybe a couple of days going inside the classroom. That's not being heavily reported.
Well, let's look at it this way. Middle income and higher income, they have computers at home. They got the website. They have internet. They have Wi-Fi. They have all the ingredients. And the parents move to these counties and in St. Johns County and in Duval County because they have access and they clearly understand computers going forward. But there's a segment of society that doesn't have access to Wi-Fi, internet, and things like this. So it is essential that everybody has an opportunity.
All right.
And by the way, they're not doing a very good job here or locally.
Robert Gruncy, the school superintendent down in Broward County. So we have a story out this week at FloridaDaily.com. On the district-wide survey, 70,000 of the 11,000 teacher union members all support online schooling. The Palm Beach County Classroom Union down there supported. Many other unions. Randy Weigarten, the president of the American Federation of Teachers, we played the clip on the radio show, Kevin. She says that remote learning, which is another code word for online, she says it hasn't worked. Evidently, it must be working because guess what? The teachers unions are supporting it, at least now, until the schools can reopen. In fact, you even had Frederick Ingram, who's the president of the Florida Teachers Association, last month at their committee saying, we want also to support hybrid instruction, which which is a kind of nice little word, which is also part of the online schooling out there. The unions don't seem to be kosher on this issue.
Unions are definitely, I think you're seeing a fundamental divide between union leadership, including Weingarten, and union rank and file. Look, I think that's going to be a problem, and it's going to continue. I think there's going to continue to be that gap. One other thing to keep an eye on, when we're talking about teachers, look, my suspicion is if there are schools in bad shape, with a lot of kids getting COVID, let's say that we have major issues in early September, God forbid, you might see the teaching equivalent of the blue flu. You might see teachers saying, hey, I'm not being paid enough for this. Let's all go online. There's a lot of factors. This is uncharted territory, but you're absolutely right. There is a fundamental divide, though, between leadership of the unions and the rank and file.
And Matt, hold on, wait, Matt, let me follow through here. Here's the thing. Online schooling is part of school choice. I mean, I'm just saying, have a little bit of both here. Here's the question. We've talked about this before. Can you imagine, let's say Kevin goes, we're in uncharted waters, and he's exactly correct. Can you imagine, let's say we have midterm exams, we see a little bit of results around Christmas time. Let's say school starts up in September. And then we find out, hey, and we're going into the next spring. Let's say things kind of turn around, and we found out that kids actually did very well online. That kind of hurts the advantage of the teachers' unions by saying to everybody, we need to be inside, because the school choice element of online schooling, which is not new, by the way, might show that we don't need everybody in a brick and mortar school.
Well, you know what? Again, another article I read. You know, could all this be to shut down parochial schools? If you don't open the schools and they can't go, and then they go online, that prevents them from going parishes and synagogues and Torah academies and things like that. It prevents them from going to school, and that way they don't get the money to support their system. So I think there's a tremendous amount of power base going here.
You're exactly correct.
The teachers are really, or unions are basically trying to shut down competition.
The Wall Street Journal had a scathing article against the union, saying that it hurts teachers, it hurts kids, and they pretty much said, hey, you guys are looking more for a power and money grab. They've got $13.5 billion out of the teachers union say they need 116. Remember, USA Today said that. Teachers unions have been allocated 13.5. They've only spent about maybe less than $1 billion. They say that they need 1.2 for every school in the state of Florida, 1.2 million. That comes out about $2,300 per student when it comes to the issue of safety. So they're going to be putting on those glass-looking welding masks, or they're going to be wearing masks overall.
Yeah, look, and there's a lot of factors we're not even thinking about. I'll give you a perfect example: school buses. You know, right now, school buses in Duval County are jammed to the rim. Okay, and all of a sudden, you're doing social distancing for school buses. That's a lot more school buses on the road. It's a lot more traffic. There's going to be a lot more complications. There are so many factors here we're not even thinking about.
Kev, let me ask you this. Hold on. Let me ask you this. You got a lot of rural districts that don't have what we see, for example, in Duval, Tampa, Orange County, South Florida, of COVID spikes. Do you think those rural counties like Hamilton and Jefferson, do you think they're going to open up on time?
I think some of them will, some of them won't. Look, I think it is easier in theory for them to open, because you're looking at a lot less schools. Jefferson County, which you just mentioned, has one school that does K-12, for gosh sake, over in Monticello. So I do think you will see some kind of tweaking of it. My guess is, when all said and done, smaller rural school districts will probably be easier to manage than larger ones like Duval or Hillsborough or Miami-Dade.
Go ahead.
Well, I would add this. I think this goes back to St. Johns County, Clay County. They actually have neighborhood schools. When they build these big developments, they had a school basically plot right in the middle of that development. Right now, one of the problems with busing is they're busing all over the kingdom come. Why don't you have a concerted effort to have great neighborhood schools where these people live, so they don't have to be bussed out of it. And that way you wouldn't have the logistical problem that Aunt Diane Green says it's going to take 9 hours to move people around on a bus. I'm just
telling you, I find it fascinating, even as Kevin says, the unions aren't even on the same page. See, to me, that's noteworthy, which we've reported at FloridaDaily.com. You don't hear anywhere else. All right. Matt Schellenberg, news contributor to FloridaDaily.com. Kevin Derby's our editor. I'm your host, Ed Dean, the publisher. Tomorrow, we do this every day. Another edition tomorrow. Don't forget, Florida's #1 political publication, but also one of the biggest publications in the state. Go to FloridaDaily.com, FloridaDaily.com, and we'll see you next time right here on Florida Daily TV.